All right, welcome back to second portion of On Cue. Rich Quinones here. Lyold Vance, kind enough to join us on Twitter at Lyold Vance, host of Lyold Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, Broad Street South, and always a contributor to BYP and On Cue. All right, so Rich Eisen, NFL Network, quote, "The Giants are absolutely done with Daniel Jones." The words I heard multiple times at the combine: buyer's remorse. I don't know how many times over the years I've mentioned that. I don't know how many times maybe I've said that in relationships. Buyer's remorse. So combine indies come and gone. And, look, I don't even know where to take this. I was playing this out last night in my mind. They go from Coughlin to McAdoo to Shermer to Judge to Brian Dable. And they went through three GMs as well. When you go through Reese, Gettleman, and now Joe Shane, the kid's injury prone. He's been inconsistent. He's had flashes. We know that. He had the great debut against Tampa coming on. Inconsistent play, played well as a starter. His first year dropped off. And then last year, after a while, you get tired of kind of saying, this is the year, no more excuses. With all that being said, they paid him a lot of money, $160, 40 a year. And I just don't know what you do. Do you run it back with Daniel Jones? Do you sit there and even contemplate, even just consider drafting a quarterback? Because if you miss, then you're set back another 3, 4, 5 years. Do you even attempt to go after a bridge, contrary to, say, Mike Florio's reports? He's got his panties in a bunch there, talking about Kirk Cousins going to Atlanta, people calling him out on it. Kirk Cousins, Russell Wilson, I don't know. So when you hear this, Eisen's report, and he's glued in, he knows. Man, I'll tell you, I thought, the injury aside, forget about what they did last year when they made the playoffs, this past season, the injury aside, once he goes down, to me, that's it. The plan needs to be in place to move on. It's just a hard pill to swallow because look where you drafted him and look at the guaranteed money and look at the contract that you gave him. And you haven't gotten back. Your return on your investment is not good.
Well, Q, it's just going to be real interesting because we probably have about a week to play with here. The league year starts on March 13th.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of these quarterbacks and things are going to be in play. And they're looking hard at Daniel Jones in terms of that contract. As you said, buyer's remorse at this point. They kind of been saying it behind closed doors. And is he worth $45 million a season? And he's coming off this Achilles injury, really not sure what you're going to get. And all that goodwill came from a 2022 season where he had that huge playoff win, and everybody said, "Oh, he turned a corner. He's a master of the
Yep. Yep.
offense and
Yep.
everything." Clicking with Brian Dable, and
Yep.
and then he laid a stinker against the Eagles in the playoffs. And then he gets hurt this season. What was it? He only played about 3, 4 games, I
That's
think,
it.
somewhere
That's
around
it. He
there.
had the big win, come back against Atlanta, and then he got hurt the following weekend. So got
Yeah,
hurt against the
so
Raiders.
it's a lot on the table. And Joe Shane, their general manager, and Brian Dable, they have to look in the mirror and say, okay, are we really going to move forward with him? Now the Giants are going to pick in the sixth slot, and it may be a situation where they look and see what kind of falls to them, and then go from there. Maybe bring him into training camp, see how he's looking. But that with that injury, you're just not sure how well he's going to come back, the explosiveness, and do they even want to go down that road? Kind of what you were hitting at. Do they just say, you know what, cut ties with him, make him a June 1st cut, like Russell Wilson's going to be for Denver? And just so much on the table. I tend to think they'll bring him back and maybe bring in a young guy to kind of compete with him.
First of all, if they draft JJ McCarthy, if they draft a kid out of Michigan, I'll lose my shit. I can tell you that right now. I don't care what Harbaugh is saying. He's looking out for his kid. I get it. That's fine. He's trying to help the draft status, and he's hoping teams will grab him so they get a better position. I understand all that. Joe Shane, here's the problem. You can scream at the mountaintop and you can state your case. When you're wrong, you're wrong. And the fact that he's pivoting, wonderful. But now that you're doubling down and you're kind of giving the sentiment, the sense that he's still our guy, that's going to get you fired. And I get it. You got a lot of egg on your face. Saquon and Daniel Jones were not a Joe Shane pick. It was, Gettleman and saying Saquon was touched by the hand of God. And It's just I don't want to go down this rabbit hole again where there was their transition after Sims and then Hostetler, and then Hanley lost his job because he benched Sims, and then Sims came back with Dan Reeves, and then they retired in '93, and then all of a sudden it was the Brown, the Grahams, the Danny Cannells of the world, and then you get to Bridge and Kerry Collins, and then from Collins you go to Kurt Warner and you draft Eli. I can't stomach that for another 5, 6, 7 years, and that's the problem in the NFL when you pay these quarterbacks that type of money and it doesn't pan out and they get hurt. We were talking about Kyler Murray like that. And now look, they're probably going to nab Marvin Harrison Jr. They believe they got the right coaching staff in place. They believe that Kyle Murray is engaged and ready to go. They're going to be a much better team. I look at the Giants and I'm like, where's your path? Where's your path to being a good team? You can't beat teams in the NFC East. You can't beat the Dallas Cowboys. You can't compete with the Philadelphia Eagles. You sweep and you'll split against a bad Washington team. So my heart tells me that you still have to draft. You got to fix the offensive line. But that's another thing I get tired of saying ad nauseum. The offensive line, because every quarterback deals with bad offensive line issues at some point during their career. You have to just make do with the hand you've been dealt. I gave Daniel Jones, I said, let me see you do it again. He got hurt. I'm done. I'm over. That's it. I wash my hands of Daniel Jones. I'm almost, I would actually make a pitch. I would go after Kirk Cousins as a bridge for 2 to 3 years. And then if you want to draft someone, you draft someone. That I can live with. I can't live with drafting a quarterback now and having Daniel Jones on the roster, if that makes sense, for competition.
Sure. And Q, you said the key guy, Joe Sheen, he's got to say to himself, is this my guy? I know I'm giving him the contract based on 2022, but what to me, in looking at his performances over years, that year was kind of an aberration. He's one of those guys that got hot in a contract year.
Yep.
Good for him, and he gets his money. But in today's NFL, it's a year-to-year proposition. The time of waiting on someone and working through it's just not happening. These owners are putting a lot of pressure on their GMs and their coaches to get it done immediately. We see, all around the league, we're seeing guys and their coordinators get fired after 1 season, 2 seasons. And Daniel Jones, he's had more than enough body of work. So if it was me, this isn't reporting, it's just opinion. I would think I would say enough's enough. He's not going to be ready for training camp. I would bring, why not, as you're saying, maybe go with a veteran. There's going to be some of these veteran quarterbacks out there in free agency, whether it's Russell Wilson or Kirk Cousins, as you said, or maybe in the draft bring somebody in. I don't like at the 6th pick bringing in a quarterback because, as you said, it might be a reach situation with a McCarthy or a Michael Penix Jr., somebody that's really not worth that 6th pick there. But maybe later on in the draft, bringing in somebody younger.
This is depressing. It is when you think about it. At least for me, it's March. Saquon, bye-bye. Darren Waller talking about retiring. I mean, his highlight was 2 drops against the Philadelphia Eagles. Then you pay Daniel Jones $160, $40 million guaranteed, or whatever the hell it was, and he can't stay healthy. I mean, it's bad, man. I mean, you want to wake me up next fall? This is just not good. I mean, he's damaged goods, and that's the thing. And how can you not have buyer's remorse? And that's sometimes I wonder what. Okay, let's talk about the quarterback position for a moment. I've been told by GMs and scouts over the years and former GMs, and there's a reason some of them are former, that the beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? What are you looking for in a quarterback? How do you not watch the tape of this kid in college? And you might fall in love with his attributes, but then ultimately you're saying to yourself, can he do it and translate success on a Sunday? Like, for instance, I said this years ago, I always thought Josh Rosen was going to be a bust. The kid in Carolina struggled. Richardson, injury prone. And yet, we dropped the ball on CJ Stroud, and that kid's offensive rookie of the year and looks like an MVP caliber player. So like when it comes to, the drafting of a quarterback, the scouting of a quarterback, you've covered the NFL for a lot of years. Is it really truly in the eye of the beholder? Like, is it subjective? Is it, every team they have these certain parameters on what they're looking for their guy, because I feel as though everyone wants that next generational talent and it just doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, Q, it's an inexact science, as we call it. They all get enamored with a guy based on a workout or this that. But as we always say, these quarterbacks, these bonus baby first round quarterbacks, are coach killers. They're either going to make a coach or they're going to kill their career in a particular city. And we see it so often where they just keep waiting and waiting and they like, well, this is the guy that we drafted, and he looks so good on tape, or when they brought him in for private workouts or whatever it was, and he's just not the guy, and you're only going to go so far with them. And the good coaches and GMs, guys that have lasted, they always say, you know what, I'm going to go with my gut, my conviction, and say this isn't my guy. Now you look at the LA Rams. Jared Goff was there. They drafted him first overall. They go to a Super Bowl with him and lose. And the head coach McVay, he's like, you know what, he's not my guy, and I'm going to go in another direction. Now they got pretty lucky, and it worked out with Stafford where they brought him in, and they were able to win behind that. But now they're kind of in no man's land because Stafford's getting old, and then you have Golf that's kind of playing well for
But
somebody
wasn't
else. But
Goff also under the Fisher regime as well?
yes,
Fisher never had
yeah,
Fisher he never had confidence in Jared Goff. And to your point, now look at Jared Goff.
yeah, and a lot of times these coaches have to inherit somebody and they get stuck with them. Look at Chicago Bears. They did not draft Justin Fields, but they got kind of stuck with him, and then they said, "All right, we'll give him an opportunity." But now, Q, they said, "Enough's enough. We're pulling the plug on him." They're probably going with a high draft pick, whether it's Drake May or Caleb Williams at this point. And you know, it is beauty as eye of the beholder, but so often these quarterbacks just do not pan out. I remember being on the sidelines with the Eagles when Kevin Cobb, they handed him the job. He was their guy, and you're watching him in practice. You're like, oh, I don't know, I'm not seeing it. And then he gets into games, and he had some difficulty taking over the reins there, and then he gets hurt.
Yeah, well, you remember that game that he came in. He basically was on the road against Baltimore when McNabb got
Yes,
benched. And at the time, Andy Reid, and I remember I'm on 1290 the ticket. I think you joined me that day. I said, you got this kid that's greener than the grass out there, seven step drop back. And he got picked off by Reid going the other way. So yeah. And then they went right back to McNabb. The problem is that now there's talk this kid's not even, Daniel Jones really isn't a starter. I mean, when I hear that they're absolutely done, and yet, yeah, the GM saying I have all the faith in the world 4 days ago, and you're doubling down, you got to pivot, man, because you're going to lose your job. And here's the other thing: if they draft a quarterback, they also get some wiggle room. They get
yeah,
some leadway, at least another 2 years. But I still believe it's the offensive line. In a perfect world, Jones would have figured it out by now. You have a decent offensive line, and then you can get a quote playmaker. You can get another wide receiver. What good is it getting a wide receiver right now with no quarterback and a shoddy offensive line? At least Kirk Cousins, I have more confidence in a guy like Kirk Cousins, even though Fleury's report is that he's going to Atlanta, be that as it may, in his body of work, because I've seen it over the years and I've been a Cousins fan. I'll take him for 2 to 3 years. But I just think they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. They're not going to tag Saquon Barkley. So think about that. No Jones, no Waller, no Barkley, players coming off injuries. Not good.
yeah. There's a lot here. And I have the Giants depth chart here in front of me, and they have a lot of free agents. Just think about left guard. You have Justin Pugh, who they got off the couch. They got to look at that position. They need to rebuild, as you said. Saquon, a free agent, they've obviously ready to step away from him. Matt Breida, his backup, is free agent as well. Their backup quarterback, Tyrod Taylor, he's a free agent. What do you do there? And then they have Adoree Jackson. He's a free agent. They're probably not going to re-sign him. Xavier McKinney at strong safety. What do they do with him as well? And at the defensive end position, uh, Jahide Ward, he's a free agent as well. So there's so many decisions from Joe Shane to do with that number 6 pick, but they got to get that pick right and kind of build around that player. Whether it's a defensive guy, they always seem to want a guy that can be a defensive pass rusher. They had so many years they did well with Pierre Paul and drafted Strahan and all those
OC.
other
Yep.
guys. OCU Manura up front, Tuck. They need somebody like that to kind of build that defense around because they traded Leonard Williams last year to Seattle. And we're just going to see where they can grow from. But as you said, right now the way this roster is looking, they're looking up at the Philadelphia Eagles and the Dallas Cowboys at this point.
All right, quick timeout. We'll come back on the outside. We'll close things out. We'll see where Russ might be cooking next season. If he might not even be, he might be marinating somewhere on the sidelines holding a clipboard. So we'll have that as we close out this edition of On Cue on the other side.